Okay, that was such a good episode. Not the best on the first season so far of Stargirl, but the 9th episode of the season, otherwise titled Brainwave, which I'm about to review over here, was such a good episode. On a purely Stargirl scale of 1 to 10, and by purely Stargirl, I mean I'm just comparing Stargirl episodes, where the Icicle episode, in terms of Stargirl and Stargirl alone, was the 10 out of 10 of this series so far. This episode is definitely a 9, if not even 9.5. First and foremost though, welcome back guys to another one of my Stargirl videos. Okay, so this was an episode that had it all. Progressed the story pretty decently, had a shit ton of Easter eggs to the comic books, and also, and at the same time, did have a little bit of action here, a little bit of reveals there, some of them to the audience and some others to the characters themselves, like Courtney for example discovering who Jordan McKent really is. But to get started, we've got the history of Brainwave. The show portrays him, before getting his powers, in that better light than what we know so far. Like he's not originally that evil guy. He lacks in self-confidence, but he's a scared guy. He's just a scientist experimenting on himself, so a little bit like a mad scientist. And not just because he experiments on himself. I mean, Hourman, Rex Tyler, he did experiment on himself, with the Miracle pill on the pages of the comics. But nonetheless though, the mad scientist part is about experimenting himself after his funding being cut off. The mad scientist part is about the fact of what he becomes due to experimenting on himself. But besides Brainwave though, this is also an Easter egg to the background story of the Dragon King, some of which is actually mentioned on this episode. The man ran experiments on himself. The man ended up with that lizard skin that he's got under that costume, experimenting on himself during the events and post the events of World War II. That's why he couldn't be killed. That's what Pat says over here. That's also pretty true to the comics. I mean, the lizard skin and all of that, very much true to the comics. We haven't seen that yet, but you could actually tell just by looking at his eyes under that costume, around his eyes actually. You can tell that something is definitely wrong, something's definitely different about that skin of his. Now since we're talking about the Dragon King, I did love that this episode gave the Dragon King his comic book origin, made him quite true to the comics in terms of the ISA and working with them or not working with them. Now on the pages of the comics, I don't really remember if he ever worked for the ISA. Shiv was a member of the ISA, but I don't think the Dragon King was ever on a single issue a member of the ISA. So over here, that's made clear he's not really a member. That's again made clear later on in the events of the episode. They're talking about that New America plan. That's a little bit of a Nazi plan, the way they talk about it. And considering the Dragon King's history, that fits the kind of thing that he wants to do. But that's really the only reason, as he does make clear, he is invested in this one. He's had his differences with these people in the past. He probably still doesn't see eye to eye with them, on everything, just on this one thing, this one plan. And that's why he's talking about those differences. So at this point, he's just an ally on this one. He's not really a member of this team-up. That's why there's a little bit of tension as well when he walks into the room. Everyone hates him, no one likes him, except for maybe Icicle. The only one that seems to care for his presence, the only one that doesn't dislike him, or at least puts on a face that does not dislike this guy, is Icicle. I think that's most probably because they've got a common enemy and a common goal over here, not because he cares for the guy all that much. But alright though, let's walk through a few little bits over here. Now this episode is building up an origin story for Brainwave and in essence building up one for Brainwave Jr. Jr. over here is basically discovering what he is, what he's capable of through figuring out his father's history, discovering his abilities, understanding them as he watches this past version of his father realize his. The only major difference over here, I think, is that Henry Jr. only gained his powers as they were passed down to him, transferred to him by his father. That was also close to his father's death. If my view of the ending of this episode happens to be correct, then maybe, just maybe, that was actually Easter egged at the very end of the episode. We're gonna talk about that when I get there. Now, throughout the entire episode, we're getting mixed signals when it comes to Henry Jr. There is nothing concrete yet, even with what happened at the end of the episode. I mean, I don't consider that full-on villainy yet, but yeah, he's defensive of his father, against that maid, whose thoughts he hears, by the way. There is the scary bit about Henry having been so immersed in watching all those videos, listening to recordings of his father, that he's now starting to share beliefs with him, and not really the best beliefs that he could share with Brainwave Sr. But alright though, 3 more quick encounters with Brainwave Jr. and then we can move on to another topic on this episode. So first off, we've got Courtney's visit to Henry, asking him to join them, to help them. The kid's stuck on that we are all victims bit, you know, him and his father. It was obvious though that the mention of Joey Zarek did sway him a bit towards Courtney's side, but he's still stuck on the idea that people are monsters, repeating all the bad things that his father mentioned on the recordings that he watched on this episode. Now Courtney believes deeply in the kid, leaves him with a choice, you know, you can do the right thing and you can join me, and I know you're gonna do that, so when you decide to do that, you can contact me. But that though brings up the topic of he better contact her as quickly as possible before the ISA abducts him or something and try to use him to do their dirty work, even though Brainwave Sr. is up and running now. I'm going to talk about that in a moment here, because I doubt that Brainwave Sr. is going to be able to do the kind of things that he used to do before. But we've got Yolanda as well paying him a visit, so many unresolved feelings over there with Yolanda. I think that Yolanda is the one who's gonna sway him to join up and team up with the JSA. I mean, one thought, one mistake, even if hurtful and significant, should make him a monster by his own logic. But there are 2 things over here. He doesn't believe that he's supposed to die over that mistake, even though he believes everyone else should die for being monsters, and he was a monster in that situation. And the second thing over here is he does still feel guilty towards Yolanda. He wanted to say something. He kind of wanted to explain himself, but he couldn't in time. She just didn't give him a chance. So yeah, I think she's gonna be the one to sway him to join up with the JSA. Like he's gonna try to show her he's a better person. But here comes though the final situation, and this situation kind of makes you think, is he a villain yet? Is he not a villain yet? Was all of that a mistake? I think it does seem clear at the end of the episode that killing that lawyer was a mistake. However though, there's another aspect to the story. I mean, Henry Sr. wakes up by the end of the episode, right after Henry Jr. kills that lawyer. Now the man doesn't sound as evil as he used to be right when he wakes up. Then again, he was in a coma. You never know if he's still that evil person. He's also not acting as the cruel father that he used to be, and they're trying to make that distinction on this episode. Like all the talk by Courtney to him about how cruel his father was halfway through the episode, I think that was all to remind us of that distinction, to tell us that when this guy wakes up, he's kind of a little bit different. Give us that hint. And he is different. I mean, he's wondering what Junior did. He's worried about what Junior did. So here comes my 3 conclusions, including an Easter egg out of the comics. Number 1, he was in a coma, a very deep coma, very akin to death. So what happened in the comics is right before he died, Brainwave Sr. that is, he kind of passed down or transferred his powers to none other than Henry King Jr., which means this is an Easter egg to that. He's almost dead, and we start noticing more of these powers, or actually we start noticing these powers in general after he goes into that coma. Number 2, Brainwave Sr. might have a partial memory loss, which I really doubt because he does remember his son, but then again the trauma caused by that entire accident was all about his powers, so maybe he forgot that part, blocked that part out of his memories. But finally, number 3, there is the possibility that the series is gonna play around with this, play it differently than in the comics. So the series might be redeeming the father. By the way, his transfer of powers on the pages of the comics was some kind of redeeming act. The series might be temporarily or permanently making him into the hero and turning the son into the villain as some kind of twist, as opposed to the comic books, some kind of unexpected twist. But I do think though that is not going to be the case. I think that Henry King Sr. is going to stick to being the villain. I think that Henry King Jr. is going to pull a couple of stunts like the one he pulled at the end of this episode. Most definitely not on purpose, most definitely not intentionally. But then after that he's going to realize, okay, I need to work this out. I need to become a better person. Maybe Courtney was right and maybe I'm supposed to be a better person. That's exactly where he's going to go. Once again, that's just my expectation when it comes to Henry King Jr. But alright though, this episode is also working its way towards the 11th episode, kind of building up towards the Shining Knight. That's the title of the 11th episode. So we've already watched the Shining Knight come to life a couple of episodes ago, like become the Shining Knight again. But then again, I'm expecting we're going to be watching him make a full recovery into the Shining Knight by the 11th episode of the season. We've seen his cleaning mop on this episode as well, him imagining that's the cosmic staff. I think that was supposed to be a scene that's hinting that this guy is returning soon, coming back to his full mental capacity soon. But you've also got the 7 Soldiers of Victory name drop, the earlier team-up that Sylvester and Pat were part of, and where you have so many Easter eggs actually right there to the comic books too. For one thing, the little kid in the Star-Spangled outfit is the Star-Spangled Kid, the first one. That's Sylvester Pemberton. He is the first Starman on the series, but do remember, in the comic books, and I've mentioned that before, he was never actually Starman. He started off as the first Star-Spangled Kid and then became Skyman. Now there are two other people on this picture that we know, but the other one that we know like majorly is basically Pat Dugan, and once again, as Stripesy. But there's another thing about this photo, the moment that he shows it to her, Pat to Courtney that is, and that's basically all about fighting the Dragon King. And the interesting thing about that is that the first time Courtney ever fought the Dragon King on the pages of the comics, she was not Stargirl, she was the second Star-Spangled Kid as part of the Stars and Stripes comics. As a matter of fact, the Dragon King is the major villain of those issues. But okay, we've also got the Shining Knight. He's kind of like the obvious character in that picture next to these two. He's a member of the team-up in the comics as well, and the focus of the 11th episode of this season, as I just mentioned. Now, it is kind of funny because these are not 7 soldiers of victory. There are 8 people in that picture. However, though, the guy on Sylvester's left is Gregory Sanders, aka Greg Sanders, also known as Vigilante. The man's got no special abilities there, but he's definitely one skilled with the use of guns and with hand-to-hand combat. Kind of reminds you of that other Vigilante, you know, the one that we watched on Arrow. But another 2 on this photo are Crimson Avenger, aka Lee Travis, and Wing, and once again members of the team-up in the comics, with the latter starting his superhero career as a sidekick of the former. The names of the other 2 were not mentioned, but looking at the photo, I would guess the guy to Wing's left could possibly be Thomas Ludlow, aka Spider. The Spider was a member of the team-up in the comics and was most definitely proficient with the use of a bow and arrow. But that though brings us to the last one, the one on the Shining Knight's left. Not sure what he's holding there, if it's a bow or some kind of gun. I'm thinking it's a bow, and that would make him the Green Arrow, never a member of that team. However, though, he does look a lot like Stephen Amell's Arrow. I know he's probably not Stephen Amell, but they might have chosen that on purpose in order to give us that impression. Now, in that case, that would make the little kid, you know, the one I just mentioned, happens to be the Spider out of the comics, a member of these team-up, into some version of Speedy as well. Because, you know, he's kind of the sidekick of the other guy, the guy who might end up being the Green Arrow. Now, we've already stepped away from Henry, but this is Henry in the context of conversations that Courtney had with other people. The entire persistence of Courtney that Henry would be a good addition to this team-up, that's pretty much all about him not being the supervillain that his father is on the pages of the comics. We've got the lie about Cindy being sent abroad, you know, overseas to study. That's very true to the reality in the comics. The Dragon King, he's always cared for her education on the pages of the comics. He wanted her to get the best of it, so he basically sent her all over the world to study in the best schools. But since we're on Cindy, we're gonna talk the ISA, and the plan is full-on mind control of the people of 6 states. That's pretty clear on this episode. Considering what was said a couple of episodes ago, I think it was already pretty clear. I don't think it's exactly mind control though. I think it's going to be more of the power of the communication and manipulation of the mind using their telepathic abilities, because their abilities are not really telekinetic. They cannot really do the mind control bit. Still though, on the Injustice Society, we've got Icicle's conversation with Barbara Whitmore, finishing this one project, feeling no sense of accomplishment. We know he's taking some kind of liking to Barbara as well, so does he just not care anymore? That's an important question here. Well, I don't think the show is making him into a good person, into some kind of a good guy. I think the message is kind of different, like, okay, he might be having a good guy moment, but again, I don't think so. I think the message is exactly, he's never gonna get enough. His goal is not a good goal, he's never gonna get enough of his villainy. I think that's the message that we're supposed to get out of this. But there's also that awkward dinner. I think Pat did notice that this guy's got some feelings for his wife at that point. The way he looked at her, and then the way that Pat looked at him, you can get that he noticed something is going wrong. We've got Cameron's grandparents, and they seem more worrisome than Jordan himself. I mean, they do seem like they're more evil than him. The way they're judging everyone on the table, they like Barbara, but they don't like Courtney. Courtney's just a kid. There's of course the big reveal of that moment, the hot dish out of the oven that he just held up, Jordan that is. Courtney now knows who 2 of her enemies are, 2 of the members of the ISA are. One just woke up from a coma and the other one was just in her house. There's one issue with Courtney in my opinion. She needs to control her reactions. I mean, the whole "Pat, I left something in the oven and it's gonna burn, come quickly, yada yada yada," that's a little bit of an overreaction that is probably noticeable in a normal situation. So this girl needs to kind of control her reactions, not just a little bit, but a lot. This kind of stuff could have waited until these people left. But yeah though, one last thing about that dinner is we had that scare at the very end. I mean, I knew Icicle was gonna talk to Courtney about Cameron, but still, the way he was so serious there, we just had to think for a moment, uh-oh, this guy might have just figured out that she is Stargirl. The other thing though is, with him being the visitor here to their home, I thought, okay, you know what, there's probably a chance he's gonna discover she is Stargirl. But then the pleasant twist over there was that they turned it all around. Instead of him discovering her or uncovering her truth, she uncovered his. But one final point though before I end this video is Barbara now knows. She has seen it all. And there's gonna be a conversation to be had over this moment on next week's episode, and a long one at that. And I wonder how that's gonna work. I don't think she's gonna approve of what she saw, of what she's gonna know by the end of next week's episode, but I think this is gonna be a small hurdle in comparison to the bigger picture. I do think that Barbara knowing might actually be a good thing. I do think that she might shed some light on who her father really is. Is he really Sylvester Pemberton, or is he someone else? There's also a good chance that they might end up being able to warn her against Jordan McKent, like take care of that guy, he's not really a good one. But that said though, my work here is done, so let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this episode. Let me know if you did like it. Let me know what you think is going to happen on next week's episode. Is Barbara Whitmore's knowledge of the situation going to be a problem for Courtney and for Pat, you know, in proceeding with their activities as part of the JSA? How do you think Brainwave Sr.'s waking up from his coma is going to affect this story going forward, especially with Brainwave Jr.? Where do you think as well Brainwave Jr. is headed? Let me know as well if you did like this video by dropping it one of those much appreciated likes, subscribing to this channel, and make sure while you're at it to enable notifications in order to get updates whenever I upload a new video, publish a new community post, or start a new live stream. But until the next time that you tune in for another one of my videos, Stargirl or otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in to this one. Stay safe and have a great day.